It started with a rusty red toolbox I picked up at a yard sale one quiet Saturday morning. I hadn't planned to stop. I was just cruising through a nearby neighborhood, sipping my coffee, trying to decompress after a brutal week dealing with policy claims and back-to-back phone calls. But something about the hand-drawn sign reading "Yard Sale Today" made me slow down. The house was modest, with a folding table out on the driveway cluttered with old books, kitchen gadgets, and a scattered collection of tools. My eyes went straight to the toolbox, a classic all-metal red case, chipped and dented, but solid. It reminded me of the one my grandfather used to keep in his garage. Just seeing it brought back the scent of sawdust in motor oil, and I could almost hear the creak of his workbench. I opened it. A couple of old wrenches, screwdrivers, and a hammer with a worn wooden handle were all that was inside. Nothing special, but it felt like a relic, something that had stories to tell. How much for this? I asked the older man running the sale. He looked to be in his 60s, calm demeanor, weathered face. $10, he said with a shrug. I handed him the cash without thinking twice. We chatted for a minute about how they don't make tools like they used to. Then I loaded it into my trunk and went on with my day, happy with my find. A week passed. The toolbox sat in my garage untouched. I kept meaning to clean it up, maybe use it to organize my own gear. Then one evening my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Wiping my hands on a towel, I opened the door halfway. A man in his late 40s stood there, thin, wiry, short brown hair, and a face that looked like it had been through things. Not threatening exactly, but unsettling. "Can I help you?" I asked. He leaned slightly closer. "You bought a toolbox at a yard sale last week, right?" I hesitated, surprised. "Yeah, why?" His voice dropped. "It's mine. Got sold by mistake. I need it back." Something didn't sit right. The man who sold it to me never said anything about someone else. I stayed polite but firm. "Sorry, I bought it fair and square. Maybe talk to the guy who sold it." He didn't like that. His jaw clenched. "I'll be back," he said, then walked away. And he did come back, again and again. He showed up 2 days later, pounding on the door. "I know you're in there," he yelled. "Just give me the toolbox and I'll leave you alone." I didn't respond. He paced back and forth like a caged animal before finally walking away. Over the next few days, it got worse. He came early in the morning, late at night. Sometimes he tried the door handle. One night I realized I hadn't locked it and felt my stomach drop. That's when I called a friend. "Dude, this guy's unhinged," he said. "You need to call the cops." I was hesitant. The guy hadn't technically broken any laws, but then he came back around 10 p.m., slamming into the door like he meant to force it open. I grabbed my phone and a kitchen knife, hands shaking. "I'm calling the police," I shouted through this door. There was a pause. Then he muttered something under his breath and walked off. When the police arrived, I explained everything. The officer nodded grimly. "You did the right thing. We'll file a report. Be careful." That night, I kept thinking, why was this guy so obsessed with that toolbox? Curiosity got the better of me. I went to the garage and opened it up again. Same old tools, but something felt off. I ran my fingers along the inside. That's when I noticed it, a false panel at the bottom. I pried it open with a screwdriver and froze. Inside were several small plastic bags filled with a fine white powder. Drugs, that's what he wanted. Not the toolbox, but the stash inside it. The next morning, I drove it straight to the police station. The officer who took my statement didn't look surprised. "Good call," he said, "but be cautious. If this guy knows what you found, he might not stop here." Later that night, I pulled into my driveway and immediately sensed something wrong. My porch light was off. My front door kicked in. Inside the house was trashed, drawers yanked out, furniture overturned. They'd been looking for the stash, not knowing it was already gone. I called the cops again. They promised. It all started with a mirror. Not just any mirror. This one was tall, antique, with an ornate gold frame carved with vines and flowers that curled like something out of a Gothic novel. I spotted it leaning against a table at a quiet yard sale on a sleepy cul-de-sac one Saturday morning. The vendor was an older man, maybe late 50s, wiry build, salt and pepper hair, and the kind of piercing blue eyes that felt like they looked through you, not at you. He sat in a folding lawn chair beneath an old oak tree, sipping iced tea like he had all the time in the world. When I asked how much for the mirror, he hesitated. His fingers rested on the frame almost protectively. "It's special," he said. "Been in my family for generations. You sure it's what you're looking for?" The way he asked caught me off guard. Most sellers are eager to haggle to unload their old junk. This guy, He seemed reluctant, almost sad. I smiled and told him it would be perfect in my living room. He nodded slowly, then said, "It's heavy, I'll deliver it." No trouble, I should have said no. I should have trusted my gut. I had a big enough car to fit it, but I didn't want to make it weird. So I gave him my address. He showed up a few hours later in an old blue pickup truck. I met him outside expecting to help carry it in, but he waved me off. "I've got it," he said, unloading it carefully, almost reverently. He brought it inside and leaned it against the wall in the living room, then stepped back like he was admiring where it had landed. "Looks good here," he murmured, his voice distant. I thanked him, but he lingered. His eyes scanned the room too long, too slow, like he was memorizing everything. When he finally left, I locked the door and watched from the window until he turned off my street. That night, I sat on the couch admiring the way the lamplight danced across the mirror's surface. It really was beautiful, aged, elegant, slightly warped in that vintage way that makes reflections shimmer. But the longer I looked at it, the heavier the room began to feel. I told myself it was just nerves. Overthinking. Nothing more. The next morning, I noticed something strange parked across the street was the same blue pickup, same truck, same man. He just sat there, engine off, watching the house. I stared for a while through the blinds, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was visiting someone. But the truck was still there hours later. And the day after that, by day 4, it had moved closer now. Right in front of my house, he was still inside, motionless, staring. That night, I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding, and walked toward the sidewalk. As soon as I neared the truck, the engine roared to life, and he drove off. No words, no gesture, just gone. But not for long. The next evening around dusk, I saw headlights sweep across my front yard. The pickup was back this time in my driveway. The man stepped out slowly and walked toward the house. I panicked, locked the doors, dialed 911, and whispered to the operator as I crouched in the hallway. He didn't try to break in. He just paced occasionally, looking up at the windows like he was waiting for something. When the police finally arrived, he bolted, sped off into the dark. I gave the cops his plate number, described what had happened. They assured me they'd patrol the area. He never came back, but I wish I could say that was the end. The mirror never felt right after that. I moved it into the garage, draped a sheet over it. But every time I walked past, I felt eyes on me. Like it remembered, like he remembered. Eventually, I brought it back inside, trying to reclaim it, to prove to myself it was just a mirror. But even in daylight, it felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me. It felt like an intruder. I don't know if he wanted me or the mirror or both, but I've stopped going to yard sales. Some things, no matter how beautiful, carry more than just dust and history. Sometimes they carry someone else's obsession. And once you invite that in, it doesn't always leave. I'm a tech guy by day, firewalls, cloud systems, endless tickets. But on weekends, I ditch the modern world for something older, slower. I've always had a soft spot for vintage stuff. There's something grounding about vinyl records, old game consoles, even VHS tapes. I still keep a working VCR in my living room. Call it nostalgia or just stubborn analog charm, but there's a weird comfort in popping in a tape and hearing that soft whir as it rewinds. So when I stumbled across a neighborhood yard sale on a sunny Saturday morning, I was just hoping to kill time and maybe find a forgotten classic. The family running the sale looked like they were in the middle of moving out, cardboard boxes stacked by the garage tables loaded with mismatched junk. Nothing really stood out until I spotted a milk crate full of old VHS tapes. Most were familiar titles: E.T., The Goonies, Back to the Future. Pure 80s gold, but tucked at the bottom was a single black tape with no label, just sticky residue where one had been. I held it up, feeling that familiar mix of curiosity and mischief. $5 for the whole crate, sold that night after a long week and 2 slices of leftover pizza. I set up for a little movie marathon. I saved the mystery tape for last. I was expecting some forgotten sitcom recording, maybe an old wedding video. Worst case, blank static. What I got was something else entirely. It started grainy, shaky, as expected from a home video. A family came into view. A man, a woman, 2 kids. They were sitting in a cozy living room, laughing, sharing popcorn, the kind of warm domestic scene that made you smile without knowing why. The footage looked like it was from the late 80s or early 90s, judging by the clothes and the camcorder quality. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then something started tugging at the back of my mind. The furniture, the layout, the wallpaper, all strangely familiar. I leaned in. My jaw slowly dropped as the camera panned across the room. It wasn't just familiar, it was my living room. The exact layout, the fireplace with the chip in the mantel, the alcove by the bookshelf. The faded floral wallpaper I had always meant to replace. I paused the tape, heart racing. There was no denying it. This was my house, filmed decades before I moved in. I told myself it had to be the previous owners. Maybe they had recorded some old family footage and left the tape behind. But when I hit play again, the mood in the video had shifted. The kids stopped laughing, the parents looked tense. Subtle at first, a glance over the shoulder, a nervous fidget, then unmistakable fear. The mother pulled the kids close. The father whispered something to her. The camera panned slowly toward the hallway. Shadows moved across the far wall, but not like anything cast by the people in the room. These shadows were tall, angular wrong. One of the children pointed toward the hall and started to cry. The mother hushed him quickly, holding him tighter. The image flickered with static. Whispers filled the background, low, unintelligible, chilling. The father stood up, taking a step toward the hallway, then froze. The camera jolted, tilted downward, and the screen cut to black. I sat there stunned, staring at the TV. My house, my living room. But something had happened there. I replayed it the next morning in daylight, hoping I had just imagined the worst. That's when I noticed a calendar hanging on the wall in the background. The date 1993, nearly 30 years ago. And before the footage ended, just for a second, a tall shadow slipped into the frame. Not cast, not human, just darkness in the shape of something standing where my hallway meets the living room. The family on screen huddled together, mouths open in silent screams, and then static. I couldn't shake the feeling. I asked an older neighbor if they remembered the people who lived here before the previous couple. They got quiet. Don't like talking about that house, they said. People left in a hurry. House sat empty for years after I stopped asking. I packed the tape away, shoved the crate into the attic, and tried to forget. But some nights when the house is still and the lights are off, I swear I hear faint whispers. Just like on the tape, I love vintage tech. But now I always check what's on a tape before I bring it into my home. Some recordings weren't meant to be replayed. I've always had a thing for vintage furniture. There's something about the imperfections, the little nicks, scratches, and faded varnish that make it feel alive, like it has a story to tell. That's why when I saw the old rocking chair at a neighborhood yard sale, I knew I wasn't leaving without it. It sat in the corner of the seller's driveway, slightly tilted on the uneven concrete, the dark wood carved with vines and curling leaves that had been worn smooth by time. The seat creaked a little when I tested it, but it was solid, charming, beautiful in that way, only something old can be. "How much for the chair?" I asked. The woman running the sale barely looked up from her phone. "20, she muttered. Her voice was flat, almost irritated, like she wanted me to take it and go. "It's an antique, right?" I pressed, curious about its history. She shrugged, eyes still down. "It's old, you want it or not." That should have been my first red flag, but I brushed it off as yard sale fatigue. I handed her a 20, loaded the chair into the back of my car, and brought it home, already picturing it tucked by the bay window in my living room. It fit perfectly. I spent the rest of the afternoon rearranging the space to make it feel like the chair had always been there. I draped a soft throw blanket over the back, slid a small rug underneath to catch the light from the window, and admired how cozy the corner suddenly looked. That evening, I made a cup of tea, curled up in the chair with a book, and rocked gently as the sky darkened outside. The wood creaked softly beneath me, a soothing rhythm, like an old house settling. Around 11 p.m., I turned off the lights and headed to bed. As I lay there drifting towards sleep, I heard a faint creaking sound from the living room. It was slow and rhythmic, back and forth, back and forth. I froze, heart thumping. It had to be the wood settling, I told myself. Old chairs make noise. I rolled over, pulled the blanket tighter, and tried to shake it off. The next few nights were the same. I'd go to bed, and sometime after midnight, I'd hear it, the same gentle creaking, like someone rocking just beyond view. I stopped using the chair. I couldn't bring myself to sit in it again, not when it felt like it had become something else. I avoided the living room at night altogether. Then one morning I walked in and immediately noticed the chair wasn't where I left it. It had moved only a few inches, just enough to make it obvious. I tried to reason with it myself. Maybe I bumped it while vacuuming. Maybe I misremembered its exact placement, but I knew I lived alone. No one else had touched it. That night, I decided to test something. After dinner, I placed a small piece of tape under one leg of the chair, precisely marking its position on the hardwood floor. If it moved again, I'd know for sure I didn't sleep well. Around 2:00 a.m., I shot upright in bed to the loudest creaking. Yet this wasn't gentle rocking. It was violent, the sound of wood grinding and hitting the wall. I bolted out of bed, heart hammering in my chest, and ran to the living room. The chair was rocking hard back and forth, the throw blanket already fallen to the floor. "Stop it!" I shouted into the empty room. And just like that, it did. The chair froze mid-motion. Silence. I looked down at the tape. The chair had moved several inches off its mark. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat on the couch with every light on, staring at the chair until the sun came up. 2 nights later, it escalated. I was drifting off on the couch, too afraid to sleep in my bedroom, when I heard something new. A whisper, low, unintelligible, and coming from the chair. I leaned forward, straining to hear my breath catching. It grew louder, but I still couldn't make out the words. "Who's there?" I asked. The whispering stopped instantly. I grabbed my phone and called my friend Anna. "I need you to come over." She rolled her eyes when I told her, but when the chair started creaking again, on its own, her face drained of color. "Okay," she whispered. "That's not normal." The last straw came the next night. I tried sleeping in the living room again, hoping my presence would stop whatever it was. At 3:00 a.m., I woke to a loud bang, the chair slamming against the wall again and again, like someone was trying to break out of it. I ran. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't look back. The next morning, I dragged the chair to the curb with a sign, "Free." I didn't care who took it. I just wanted it gone. But even now, weeks later, the living room feels wrong. Empty but not peaceful. Every time I hear a floorboard creak, I freeze. Some pieces of furniture carry more than memories. I learned that the hard way. Yard sales have always been my weekend therapy. After long weeks of screen fatigue and endless back-to-back client calls, I find peace in rummaging through other people's cast-offs. Those forgotten relics sitting quietly on someone's driveway, just waiting for a second chance. There's something thrilling about it, like each object holds its own quiet mystery. One Saturday morning, coffee in hand and sun creeping over the rooftops, I headed out to a community-wide yard sale a few blocks over. The streets were buzzing with people and fold-out tables overflowing with dusty books, trinkets, and kitchenware that hadn't seen use in a decade. I wandered toward a quiet cul-de-sac, away from the crowd, where one solitary sale was set up beneath a sprawling oak tree. That's where I saw it, a tall gold-framed mirror leaning against the side of the house, slightly tilted, catching the morning light in a way that made it look like it belonged in an old Victorian home. The frame was beautifully carved, floral vines twisting elegantly along the border, faded just enough to show its age. It was gorgeous, the kind of piece that made a room feel complete. As I ran my fingers along its edge, a man stepped out of the shade. He looked to be in his late 50s, wiry build, salt and pepper hair, and eyes that pierced a little too deeply. Admiring the mirror, he asked. His voice was even, but had a tone that made me pause. "Yeah, it's stunning," I replied. "How much?" He hesitated, hand resting gently on the top of the frame. "It's been in my family for generations," he said slowly. "You sure it's what you're looking for?" The question was strange, like he wasn't trying to sell it at all. Still, I smiled. "It looked great in my living room." He gave a small nod and sighed. "All right, but it's heavy. Let me deliver it to your place, I don't mind." That should have been the red flag, but I didn't want to be rude. Against my better judgment, I gave him my address. A few hours later, his pickup truck pulled into my driveway. I went outside to help, but he waved me off. "I've got it," he said, almost reverently, as he carried the mirror inside. He placed it against the far wall of my living room, stepped back and stared at it like it was something sacred. "Looks good here," he murmured, scanning the room like he was memorizing it. I thanked him, but something in his eyes made my skin crawl. He lingered longer than necessary before finally walking out the door. That night, I admired the mirror again. It really did suit the room, capturing the lamplight with an old-world glow that softened the space. But as night fell, something about it unsettled me. I brushed it off as overthinking. Stress imagination. I went to bed. The next morning, I noticed a blue sedan parked across the street. I didn't recognize it, but didn't think much of it until later that afternoon when it was still there. I peeked through the blinds. The same man, the vendor, was sitting in the driver's seat, staring directly at my house. My stomach dropped. I told myself maybe he lived nearby. Maybe it was a coincidence, but the next day the car was back. Then again, the day after that, closer this time, parked right at the curb in front of my home. I couldn't pretend anymore. That evening, while preparing dinner, I looked out the window. There he was, just sitting, watching. I gathered my courage and stepped outside. As I neared the curb, he started the car, and drove off, not a word. That night I barely slept. The slightest creak in the floorboards made my heart pound. The following evening, headlights flooded my front yard. I peeked through the curtain. The sedan was in my driveway. He stepped out of his car, walked toward my front door, and began pacing along the porch. I panicked, locked everything, dialed 911. I whispered to the operator, explaining the situation as I crouched behind the kitchen island. Heart racing, he didn't try to break in. He just stood there for minutes that felt like hours, occasionally glancing up at the windows like he knew I was there. When the sirens finally blared down the street, he ran, vanished into the night. The officers took my statement, took down the plate, and said they'd patrol the area. He never came back, but I was changed. Even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling. I moved the mirror to the garage and covered it with a sheet, but I still glance toward it like it might be hiding something or someone. I've stopped going to yard sales. I still love old things, but I no longer trust them. That mirror didn't come alone, and sometimes it still feels like he's watching through it. There's something enchanting about old furniture. Its cracks, the worn wood, the stories it holds in silence. I've always loved vintage pieces, the kind with personality and history. So when I saw that dark wood rocking chair at a local yard sale one Saturday morning, tucked near the back behind some dusty lamps and water-stained books, I was immediately drawn to it. It looked sturdy despite its age, carved with ivy vines curling along its armrests and back. The seat showed wear, but that only added to its character. It felt like it belonged in a quiet corner of my living room by the bay window, catching the morning sun. The woman running the sale looked tired, distant. She barely glanced up when I asked about the price. $20. She said flatly. Her tone was odd, quick, dismissive, almost like she was in a hurry to get rid of it. It's an antique, right? I asked, hoping for a bit of history. She shrugged. It's old. You want it or not? Red flag? Probably, but I chalked it up to yard sale burnout and handed her the cash. I should have listened to my gut. That afternoon, I rearranged the furniture, placed a soft throw blanket over the chair, and stood back to admire the setup. It looked perfect, like it had always been there. That evening, I sat down in it with a book and a cup of tea. The gentle creaking as I rocked back and forth was oddly soothing, comforting. Even I felt like I'd made a great find. Around 11 p.m., I turned off the lights and headed to bed. But as I lay there in the dark, I heard a sound I couldn't explain, creaking. Not loud, but steady, rhythmic, back and forth. Just like the chair. I sat up listening. It stopped. I told myself it was the wood settling, maybe the wind shifting the house. Old homes make noise. Still, my heart beat a little faster than usual as I drifted to sleep. Over the next few nights, the creaking continued. Always late at night, always just loud enough to hear from the bedroom. The kind of sound that seeps into your awareness and makes you second-guess everything. I stopped using the chair. It had gone from comforting to unsettling. One morning, I walked into the living room and froze. The chair was facing a different direction, angled toward the hallway. I hadn't moved it. I lived alone. No one had been over. I placed it back against the wall and tried not to think too much about it, but it nagged at me. That night, before going to bed, I put a small strip of masking tape beneath one leg of the chair to mark its exact position. If it moved again, I'd know for sure. It didn't take long. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke to a loud, jarring bang, wood slamming against plaster. I ran into the living room, flipping the lights on. The chair was rocking hard, violently. The throw blanket had fallen to the floor, and the sound of the wood hitting the wall echoed in my ears. I shouted, "Stop!" And the chair came to a halt mid-motion. Dead still. Room was silent. I checked the tape mark. It had shifted nearly a foot. I barely slept that night. I stayed up on the couch watching the chair, like it might do something else. My heart wouldn't stop racing. The next evening, something even worse happened. Around midnight, as I was locking up for the night, I heard whispering. Faint but undeniably real. Low, unintelligible words drifting out from the direction of the chair. I edged closer to the living room. Barely breathing, the whispers grew louder but no clearer, like they were coming from underwater or behind a wall. "Who's there?" I asked, voice trembling. Silence. I grabbed my phone and called my friend Anna. "I need you to come over." Now she showed up, skeptical until she heard the creaking. Her face turned pale. "Okay," she whispered. That's not normal." 2 nights later, I decided to confront it. I dragged a sleeping bag into the living room and planned to spend the night on the floor. If something was happening, I wanted to witness it. Around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by the loudest bang yet. The chair was rocking violently, slamming against the wall again and again, like someone was trying to escape it. I didn't scream. I ran. I grabbed my keys, jumped into the car barefoot, and didn't stop driving until I was blocks away. That morning, I dragged the chair to the curb with a sign that read simply, "Free." I didn't care who took it. I just wanted it gone. But even now, long after the chair has been removed, the house doesn't feel right. It's quieter, but not in a peaceful way. The kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting. I still flinch when I hear creaking at night, and every so often when I glance toward that corner by the bay window, I swear I see it still there, rocking, just for a second. I used to think yard sales were harmless, little community events where forgotten treasures got a second chance. Now I flinch at the sight of a cardboard sign taped to a light pole. What started as a relaxing weekend ritual turned into one of the most terrifying stretches of my life, and no matter how much time passes, I can't seem to let it go. It wasn't just one bad purchase. It was a series of them, a toolbox that nearly got me killed, a mirror that came with someone else's obsession, a VHS tape that showed my own home long before I ever lived in it, a rocking chair that moved on its own and whispered in the dark, one after another. These yard sale finds unraveled the safe, predictable life I'd built for myself. And while each object is long gone, either in police custody or taken by some poor stranger who doesn't know what they've inherited, the sense of violation of being watched, of never truly being alone in my own home, that part has stayed. After the last incident, I replaced every lock, installed a security system, cameras, floodlights, motion sensors. At night, I leave a few lamps on, not because I need the light, but because I need the illusion of control. I've stopped staying at home alone for extended periods. I often crash at a friend's or invite someone over just so there's another voice, another heartbeat in the space. I check the windows twice, sometimes 3 times before bed. And if I hear a creak in the middle of the night, I don't roll over and go back to sleep anymore. I sit up, I listen. I wait. The police reports are filed, but they've stopped following up. No updates, no arrests. It's like these people, whoever they were, melted into the cracks of the world. No one ever found the man who stalked me after I bought that mirror. No one could trace the origin of the VHS tape that somehow captured my living room decades before I moved in. The officer who helped me turn in the stash hidden in the old toolbox warned me to be cautious, that maybe whoever lost it wouldn't stop looking. And he was right. My house was broken into, ransacked, every drawer pulled out, furniture overturned, closets emptied. The only thing they didn't know, the drugs were already with the police, but that didn't stop them from trying. Even now, I sometimes pull into my driveway and get that gut feeling, like someone's been watching the place, like someone's been waiting. I've tried to reclaim normalcy. I've put up new curtains, repainted rooms, donated anything I didn't absolutely need. I even replaced the furniture piece by piece, hoping to break whatever connection these events had to my home. And yet some things don't leave with the trash. The fear lingers in the corners. The whispers stay in your mind long after they've gone quiet. Some nights I lie in bed and think I hear soft footsteps in the hallway. Other times it's the distant sound of a chair creaking, or worse, the faint hiss of tape static, like an old VHS loading in a machine that isn't even plugged in. I've talked to therapists. One told me what I experienced was trauma, layered with suggestion that my love for vintage things primed me to attach meaning to them, that maybe none of it was real, just my brain looking for patterns, turning coincidence into horror. But there's one thing none of them can explain: why every single object I brought home from those yard sales came with a story I never asked for. A dark one. A story that demanded to be told in whispers and creaks and shadowy visits in the middle of the night. I still remember the first moment, the excitement of finding that toolbox for $10. It felt like a win. Something nostalgic, familiar. And maybe that's the cruelest part of it all. These things didn't enter my life like threats. They came like memories, like gifts. Now I don't trust anything secondhand. Not the chair at the thrift store, not the framed art left on the curb, not even books. Because I've learned that sometimes it's not the object that's haunted, it's the history it carries. And when you bring it into your home, that you're not just adding decor, you're inviting that history in. Whatever came before, whatever clung to it, whatever was left behind, now belongs to you. So yeah, maybe it was just bad luck. Maybe it was my imagination. But still, every time I see a stranger's pickup truck parked just a little too long across the street, or a free item left at the end of a driveway, I feel it again, that cold sinking weight in my chest. Some things, some stories don't stay buried in the attic. I used to think yard sales were innocent, just cheerful neighborhood events full of dusty knickknacks, forgotten toys, and maybe a few hidden gems if you were lucky. There was something comforting about the ritual, grabbing a coffee, driving with the windows down, casually strolling through strangers' driveways in search of nothing in particular. But after everything that's happened, I don't see yard sales the same way anymore. Not after the red toolbox, the VHS tape, the mirror, the rocking chair. One by one, each item seemed like a harmless find. Ordinary objects left behind by people moving out, cleaning up, or simply letting go of their past. But I've learned that sometimes what's being let go of is more than just physical. It's emotional, it's dangerous, it's haunted, either by memories, by people, or by something else entirely. Each item I brought home carried something with it. A presence, a secret, a piece of a story that I wasn't supposed to be part of. And by the time I realized that it was too late, the toolbox brought a stranger to my doorstep, angry, desperate, relentless. What I thought was a $10 nostalgia trip turned out to be a stash spot for drugs, and I found myself stalked, threatened, and nearly broken into by people who didn't care who I was, only what I had. The VHS tape was something else entirely. I thought it was a forgotten home video. Instead, it showed footage of my own living room filmed long before I moved in, and a family terrified of something lurking just off screen. Even now, I don't know what scared them more, what was in their house, or the fact that it was still in mine. The mirror, that was the worst kind of horror human. The man who sold it to me insisted on delivering it. Then he started watching me parked outside my house, staring, obsessing. Whether it was about the mirror or me, I still don't know, but the fear of seeing that blue sedan again hasn't gone away. And the rocking chair, beautiful, carved, and malevolent, started rocking on its own. At night, I heard whispers from it. It moved. It slammed against walls, until the night I fled the house barefoot and dumped it on the curb at dawn. Someone took it. I still wonder who and what they've been through since. People think these stories are exaggerations, urban legends wrapped in nostalgia and fear. But they're not. They're real, and what's worse is that they're quiet. These things don't happen all at once. They creep in. They settle beside you like a shadow you didn't notice before. And by the time you do, they've already made themselves at home. That's what terrifies me most. Not the ghosts or the stalkers or the nightmares. It's the way danger comes disguised in the ordinary, in the old, in the charming, in the things we pick up without thinking. A mirror, a tape, a chair. That's why I've stopped going to yard sales, stopped browsing thrift shops, stopped picking up free signs on furniture left at the end of driveways, because I've learned that not everything discarded is worthless. Some things are left behind for a reason. I share these stories not to entertain, but to warn. Sometimes the past doesn't stay in the past. Sometimes it hides in the things people give away. So if you're ever at a yard sale and you feel something off, if the vendor seems too eager or too reluctant, or if the item makes you pause for no good reason, listen to that instinct, trust it, and if you ever bring something old into your home and strange things start to happen, don't brush it off. Don't wait for it to get worse, because by then it already has. I still love vintage things. I still believe that objects carry stories. I just don't believe there are always stories you want to hear. It started with a mirror, tall, antique, and hauntingly beautiful. I found it at a yard sale while driving through a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Portland. The sale looked like a typical downsizing affair. Mismatched furniture, stacks of old records, dusty lamps. But the mirror stood out. It was leaning against the side of the house, framed in heavy walnut, its surface slightly warped with age. Something about it felt important, like it had belonged to someone who looked into it far too often. The man running the sale was thin mid-50s with pale skin and watery gray eyes. When I asked about the mirror, he seemed almost surprised that I noticed it. "It's been in my family a long time," he said. "Goes back generations." His voice had an uneven cadence, calm, but like something was bubbling underneath. "It's heavy. Let me deliver it for you." I hesitated. "I've got a pickup I can manage." "No." He cut in too quickly. "I insist. I want to make sure it doesn't get damaged." Against my better judgment, I agreed. 20 minutes later, he pulled up behind me in an old beige van with no back windows. I helped him bring it inside. He positioned it carefully against the wall, in my living room where the afternoon light hit it just right. He didn't say much after that, just stared at the mirror for a moment and whispered, "It looks right." Then he left without another word. That night, I sat on the couch watching TV, but I kept glancing at the mirror. It caught reflections oddly, like it was a half second behind. I shrugged it off. Probably just the old glass. But the next day I noticed a car parked across the street. Same beige van, same man, just sitting, watching. I didn't panic yet. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But he was still there when I came back from work, and the day after that. On the third day, I walked out to confront him. He started the van the moment I stepped outside and drove off. Fast, no eye contact, no explanation. But he came back that night, parked further down the street, lights off. It was unsettling. I called a friend and told her what was happening. "That's creepy as hell," she said. "You should call the cops." I didn't want to overreact, but something in my gut told me she was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing small sounds, creaks, soft thumps like someone walking barefoot on wood floors. I finally got up and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection stared back, but something felt off. The room behind me didn't look quite right. The shadows were too deep. The light from the hallway lamp didn't reflect correctly. I touched the mirror. Oh, too cold. The next morning, the van was back. This time closer, parked directly across from my driveway. I snapped a photo, called the non-emergency police line, and explained the situation. An officer came by, took a report, and assured me they'd swing by the area more often. That night, the van didn't return. But the house felt wrong, still quiet but not peaceful. I kept the mirror covered with a sheet. I even considered moving it to the garage. But something told me not to touch it again, like I'd be breaking some invisible agreement. Weeks passed, the man never came back, the police never followed up. I moved the mirror upstairs to the guest room just to be rid of it. But sometimes when I'm walking by that door, I hear something, breathing. And once, just once, I swear I saw him. Not in the street, not in the van, but in the mirror, standing in the reflection, even though the room behind me was empty. Now I keep the door closed, always, and I've stopped buying antiques. Some mirrors don't just reflect what's behind you. They remember who used to be there.